Have you ever felt like a lighthouse for chaos? Like no matter where you go, the same patterns find you. Liars, manipulators, people who drain you until you forget your own name. And yet, right beside you, someone else walks the same hallway, breathes the same air, but somehow remains untouched, almost invisible to the same storms that keep choosing you.
You look around, tired, bone-tired, wondering why you're the one who always ends up carrying the weight, absorbing the tension, being picked by people who feed on softness. You don't go looking for trouble. You avoid conflict. You try to keep things peaceful. You give more than you should. And still, the cycle repeats, as if something in you keeps sending out a signal, choose me. But what if I told you, it's not about luck. It's not about being too nice or too naive. It's something far more invisible and far more dangerous. Jung discovered it. Most people ignore it. But predators? They don't. They sense it. They can smell unresolved wounds like blood in the water. They don't need to know your story. They feel the tremor in your silence, the tension behind your eyes, the guilt you carry for simply existing. And that's what draws them in. Not your kindness, not your goodness, your open wounds. The solution isn't shouting louder. It isn't cutting people off and calling it healing. It's not walls or rules or trendy mantras. That's not real protection. That's a costume. You become untouchable the moment you stop hiding from your shadow. Because predators don't fear strength. They fear integration. They fear the person who has already looked inside and made peace with their own darkness. There's nothing left to manipulate, nothing left to use. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And when you finally see it, not just hear it, see it, the game ends. You don't become colder. You don't become cruel. You just stop being visible to people who were only ever hunting your fracture. Not because you're hiding, but because there's nowhere left to enter. No cracks, no silent hunger, no invisible plea for love. And that's what changes everything. So stay, not just to understand why they choose you. Stay so you can finally walk free. Free to speak without apology. Free to rest without guilt. Free to stand in the world without bracing for war. Because the answer was never to resist toxicity. It was to stop needing recognition from those who live in the dark. Are you ready? Let's walk through a place most people fear. Jung dedicated his life to what society avoids, the unconscious machinery beneath our choices. He found that the darkest patterns don't shout. They repeat, quietly, subtly, over and over, until they run your life while you still believe it's just bad luck. Predators don't choose randomly. They scan, they feel, they recognize the music of emotional weakness like a scent in the air. Shame, fear, unhealed hunger. These aren't just feelings. They become signals, silent invitations. They echo your shadow back to you. If you find yourself constantly proving, pleasing, or defending your own sanity, it's not because you're broken. It's because you're broadcasting something you can't hear, and the world is answering, over and over, with the same face in different bodies. Jung called it projection, the unseen transmission of what you repress. Every part of you that you disown becomes a leak, and predators drink from that leak, not because they're mystical, but because they're instinctual. But when you reclaim the parts you've buried, the anger, the fear, the envy, the hunger. You become whole. And wholeness has a frequency. Jung called it psychic integrity. It doesn't beg, it doesn't flinch, it doesn't explain, it doesn't attack, but it doesn't absorb either. It's like stone, not hard from bitterness, but smooth from knowing. And people who survive by feeding off chaos simply walk past it, because they sense something terrifying to them. You no longer need to be chosen. You're not playing, you're not performing, you're not offering softness in hopes of being spared. You're simply whole, and that is something they cannot use. Jung said the shadow isn't a metaphor, it's a living entity inside you. And what you deny doesn't vanish, it mutates into weakness, into self-betrayal, into the open wound that keeps bleeding every time someone pushes the right button. But when you stop running, when you turn and face it, something shifts. The same force that used to destroy you becomes armor. Your unclaimed parts start working for you, and people who once sniffed out your insecurity like wolves in the dark start sensing something they can't touch. Maybe right now you're wondering, but how? How do I integrate something I can't even see? And this is where the real descent begins. Because psychic integrity isn't a quote on your bedroom wall. It's not found in clever affirmations or the glow of spiritual bypass. It's a brutal, sobering walk into the basement of your psyche, where the mirror doesn't flatter and the silence doesn't lie. In a moment, we'll go into that terrain together. We'll look straight at the mechanisms of projection, how your nervous system sticks parts of yourself onto others like emotional graffiti. You'll finally see why the people who enrage you or seduce you are often carrying the exact traits you've buried in yourself. But for now, I want you to understand this. Blaming the world will never be enough. It's easy to scream narcissist, to point at the vampires, to label others as broken, toxic, monstrous, and maybe they are. But if that were the whole story, leaving would have fixed it. And it didn't. You moved cities, you changed jobs, you ended the relationship, and yet, somehow, the same pattern appeared again. A new mask, the same energy, over and over, until the only conclusion that remains is the one you've avoided. It's not just about them. Jung called it projection, the invisible transference of your own rejected self onto the world. The selfishness you hate, the control that triggers you, the audacity that fascinates you. Maybe, just maybe, there's a part of you that wants the same, that wants to take up space, speak without permission, be seen without shame. But long ago, someone taught you that power was dangerous, that anger was ugly, that desire made you unlovable, so you buried it. And now, every time someone walks freely in the traits you were forced to kill, your body reacts like it's under attack. But it's not hatred, it's recognition. And that's where the work begins. Jung once said that only when the individual transforms his own attitude does the soul of a nation begin to shift. It sounds poetic, but it's a warning. Because as long as you avoid your inner fractures, you keep broadcasting a signal. Here lives pain, here hides fear, here bleeds something that still hasn't been owned. And those who feed on chaos, they know exactly how to find it. Toxic people don't need a reason. They need an opening, and they follow scent like instinct. That's why they always show up at the worst moment through the sweetest disguise. Recognizing your projections is brutal work. It means admitting that some of what made you a target lives inside you. It means dropping the illusion that you were only a victim. But in that collapse, your power begins. The moment you ask yourself, "What is this person mirroring back to me?" you begin to recall your energy. You stop bleeding into the world. You stop demanding others to change and start transforming your own reflection. This is not about blaming yourself for what others did. It's about reclaiming the only thing you've ever had control over, your frequency. Because the truth is, you can't choose who appears in your life, but you can decide who has access. And when your projections dissolve, you become invisible to hunters. There's nothing left to bite. But clarity isn't enough. There's another layer, a darker one, the game. Because knowing your shadow is only the beginning. If you keep dancing in the drama, you stay their supply. And that's the hardest truth of all. Sometimes, we're the ones feeding the very thing we claim to want gone. Toxic people don't survive on attention alone. They eat emotion, fear, outrage, desperation. Every time you explode, explain, justify, or beg, you nourish them. They provoke, you react. They plant silence, sarcasm, micro-attacks. You bite, you burn, you spiral. And for them, that chaos, that's a feast. They don't need to win the argument. They only need you to lose your center. Because once you're spinning, they own the rhythm. And the only way out is to stop dancing. Because in that moment, it no longer matters who's right, who started it, who crossed the line. The focus shifts entirely to your reaction. Suddenly, you become the unstable one, the exaggerated one, the one who feels too much. You try to explain, but all they see is your intensity. And they weaponize it. You spiral, you doubt, you blame yourself, and they walk away spotless. Sometimes even as the victim. How many times have you calmly tried to explain something to someone who clearly wasn't interested in understanding you? How many hours wasted crafting the perfect argument, hoping they'd finally get it? And what did you get in return? Nothing. Or worse, more confusion, more gaslight. You walked in sure of yourself and left questioning your own perception. That's not accidental, that's strategy. Toxic people don't need facts. They need leverage. And your emotions are their favorite tool. Jung taught something that stings. What you resist persists. The more you react, the more energy you inject into what you want to escape. You're not just showing them what hurts. You're teaching them where to push. They study you, quietly, patiently, mapping your nervous system until they own your triggers like strings on a puppet. So what's the antidote? Neutrality. Not the fake kind, not avoidance, not silence drenched in resentment. Real neutrality. A refusal to be moved. A conscious decision to no longer offer your nervous system as their playground. But don't mistake neutrality for weakness. It's not passivity, it's power. When you stop performing, when you answer chaos with calm, with stillness, the entire game collapses. You puncture their balloon with nothing but your presence. And they hate it. Because there's no fuel left, no drama, no reaction. Just a mirror that refuses to reflect. Eventually, they leave. Not because you fought back, but because you stopped dancing. And that silence becomes terrifying to someone who needs control to survive. But to get here, To remain grounded while fire surrounds you, you must develop something most people never even consider: internal boundaries. Not walls, not escape plans, boundaries that begin inside. That whisper, "I decide what enters," that shield your nervous system from manipulation. And that's where we're going next. Because here's what nobody tells you. Real boundaries aren't about saying no to others. They're about finally saying yes to yourself. External limits mean nothing if your internal walls are paper thin. You can cut people off, set rules, block numbers, and still feel haunted. Because toxic people don't just invade your space. They colonize your mind. And they do it easily. Because you left the door wide open. That door? It's not kindness. It's need. The need to be liked. The need to please. The need to be the good one. To avoid conflict. To prove you're worthy. As long as those needs are screaming silently inside you, anyone can pull your strings, and they will. Carl Jung named the reason, the shadow is a living part of the personality. As long as it remains unconscious, it controls you. And one of the deepest shadows we carry is the addiction to being loved, to be seen as good, just, fair, gentle. And underneath that, there's a raw, trembling fear. Fear of being rejected, abandoned, forgotten. And predators smell that. They don't need to say a word. Just a shift in tone, a cold silence, a glance that says, "I'm disappointed in you," and you collapse into guilt, apology, over-explanation. In seconds, they're back in control. Internal boundaries are the antidote. They are the silent steel inside your spine, not visible, not loud, but unbreakable. They mean knowing, deep in your gut, that you don't need anyone's approval to breathe. They mean being willing to lose comfort, connection, and even affection if it costs you your truth. This isn't about becoming cold or paranoid. It's about walking lighter. Because when your self-worth no longer depends on someone else's validation, you stop flinching. You stop chasing. You stop falling into traps set by people who only exist through reaction. And toxic people? They feel that. They sense the absence of weakness. The hooks don't land anymore. You're not bait. You're not available. And that energy, that grounded, unmoved presence, makes you untouchable. With internal boundaries, you don't need to fight. You don't need to explain. Someone tries to provoke you, and you don't flinch. You don't play. You see the game and walk right past it. That's not avoidance. That's mastery. You stay calm not because the world got gentler, but because their moods no longer define your worth. Their tone, their silence, their disapproval, none of it rewrites who you are. But here's the brutal part. Developing internal boundaries isn't comfortable. It's not affirmations. It's not a mindset. It's war. It means staring straight into the parts of yourself that still beg, that still ache to be liked, that still tremble at the thought of being misunderstood. It means sitting in the silence of rejection and saying, "I'm still here. I still choose me." And only those willing to walk into that fire ever find peace that doesn't depend on performance. It's a process. No one wakes up fully rooted. But every time you choose truth over approval, even when it costs you someone's closeness, you carve a line into your psyche, a boundary, a frame, a signal. And toxic people? They read it. They feel the shift, and they go elsewhere. But there's one more layer, the one most people never touch, because it's not enough to spot your projections, stop reacting, and reinforce your spine. You need to do something far more terrifying. You need to turn inward and meet the creature you've tried your whole life to hide. Because as long as you reject your own darkness, someone out there will always use it against you. They'll weaponize your shame, your guilt, your buried impulses, and the only way to become untouchable is to accept them first. This next step is the most dangerous and the most freeing. If any part of this has resonated with you, explore the pinned comment. Beyond the shadow and dialogues with the unconscious will guide you deeper. But be warned, this is where things get real. Because now, we're walking into the cellar. Jung said, "To know your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of others." That isn't poetic, that's tactical. Every part of yourself you've disowned, the envy, the anger, the bitterness, the hunger to control, still lives. It breathes beneath your surface, and the more you deny it, the more power it holds. We've all had cruel thoughts, fantasies of revenge, moments where we wanted to manipulate or hurt, and most of us buried them, convinced that hiding is the same as healing. But it's not. They don't die, they wait, in silence, in shadow, until the moment someone shows up who knows exactly how to drag them out. And if you haven't made peace with them yet, they'll own you. And the darker truth? The more you pretend to be pure, the more exposed you are. Toxic people don't attack at random. They scan for the cracks. If you're obsessed with being good, perfect, beyond reproach, they will instinctively press on the exact place that proves you're not. And when that mask cracks, you lose control. You react. You try to prove you're still good. And just like that, you're back in the trap. Integrating the shadow doesn't mean becoming cold. It means becoming honest. It means saying, yes, I've felt rage. Yes, I've wanted power. Yes, I've envied, judged, pretended. But I see it now. I name it. And because I see it, it no longer owns me. You can feel fury and not act on it. You can think cruel thoughts and still choose compassion. Because true compassion is not the absence of shadow, it's the mastery of it. When you admit your envy, it stops rotting you from the inside. When you recognize your desire to dominate, you stop submitting to those who try to control you. This is the unspoken work, tearing down the masks you built to survive. Masks of niceness, control, innocence, all just shields to avoid rejection. But Jung was clear, the danger isn't the shadow. It's your refusal to face it. What remains unconscious doesn't disappear. It drives your choices. It shapes your relationships. It becomes your fate. And you'll call it bad luck. But when you integrate it, everything shifts. You stop trembling at the words of others. You stop shrinking under judgment. Because nothing they say about you can hurt more than what you've already made peace with. You know your demons, and you no longer run. That's stillness, that's silence, that's psychic sovereignty. And toxic people can't stand it. They need you to flinch. They need you to hide. They need your shame to hook into. But when there's nothing left to hide, they lose their grip. Jung gave us a key most will never use. You cannot eliminate toxic people, but you can become unrecognizable to them. When your energy no longer echoes pain, when your wounds no longer leak, when your self no longer trembles, you disappear from their radar. You become emotionally invisible to those who feed on fear. They walk past you like shadows looking for someone else to haunt. Because now, there's nowhere left to enter. If this video cracked something open in you, write this in the comments. I've stopped hiding from myself. Like the video. Share it with someone who's still trapped in the game, and subscribe. Because here, in Beyond the Shadow, we don't heal to be seen. We heal to be free.